You're listening to the Lima Baptist Temple podcast, where you can hear the latest messages and other conversations as we strive to go, serve, and love in our communities. If you want to know more about us, visit us online at limabaptisttemple.org. If you enjoyed our podcast, be sure to subscribe and check us out on YouTube.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Lima Baptist Temple podcast. My name is Ben Anderson. I'm an associate pastor here at the church. And with me is our student pastor, tech and media director, and anything we ask him to do. So he was complaining last time I did not introduce him properly. So there you go, Pastor Michael Green. Let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you, guys. But no, we're glad to be here. We always enjoy hanging out with you on Thursday afternoons on the Conversations podcast, where, Michael, we kind of talk about the message Sunday, dig a little bit deeper in your
Make
word.
It practical.
Yep.
Put handles on it.
Handles,
right.
Yep. We like to put handles on it so people can just use it better in their walk with Jesus and in their daily lives.
Yeah.
But everything we talk about on this podcast relates back to our mission, which is go, serve, and love. And the message this past week is going to be right down that alley.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a great time. Also, we always love to hear from you guys. So if you guys have ideas, you have topics you want us to talk about, wrestle with, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Head on over to our website. You can fill out a form there, and we'll get it. Just make sure we know you're talking about the podcast.
Yep.
Any other introductory remarks, Michael? Am I missing anything?
I don't think so. I think you hit it all on the head.
Cool. I just kept going. I didn't even give you time to breathe or jump in there.
That's good.
All right. Well, Michael, Sunday, it was you.
Yeah.
It was you. Senior Sunday, where you recognized all the graduates, and you had, a soft, mushy message. No, it was very convicting, actually. Nothing soft about it, but you gave a really, really good challenge to. I was actually watching online because I was sick, but challenged us to get out of our comfort zone, cross that threshold, to share Jesus with people, and it was just really good.
Yeah, but I think the important thing to understand too from that message is, like, none of us have arrived there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not perfect. Like, like I was preaching that Sunday to myself just as much as everybody else in the room. Like, none of us have arrived to that place where, I do this all the time now, so I'm good.
Yeah.
And it's just a reminder that, if it felt convicting, like, that's the Holy Spirit and God's Word convicting us, but don't get too discouraged because there's other people that are not any better than you or even worse. And so, it's just a reminder of, like, Pastor Michael is not holier than thou and perfect in all these areas.
Yeah,
so.
Well, I think a lot of times, whether it's Pastor Al, myself, you, whether it's a, Sunday morning group lesson or, in the main service, a lot of times we are preaching to ourselves.
Well, and I mean, ministry is ultimately an outflowing of what is coming in, right? And so if this is how God is speaking to me, if this is what's going on in my life, then a lot of times what comes out is going to be kind of the same message that God has been. So a lot of times pastors will tell you, like, we've preached this message to ourselves before you've ever heard it.
Yep. Great reminder. And and I think we've mentioned that quite a bit on this podcast is, hey, we are a work in progress. And as we talk about even topics on the podcast, there are things that we're wrestling with.
Yeah.
And, oftentimes it'll be something we had talked about several weeks prior and just trying to wrestle with it ourselves. But yeah, great message on Sunday. Missio Day. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Okay. I had to ask Pastor Michael. I was like, how do you say that? But challenge us to cross those thresholds. And I think one of, my biggest takeaways from that message is I was listening. I just kept thinking of different, scenarios, over the last, few months of, maybe opportunities I've missed where I did get nervous. I did, my pride got in the way. My fear got in the way. I didn't cross that threshold to share Jesus with somebody. So they could have, their life, drastically change.
Yeah.
But it was just a really, really good reminder, just as I kind of, went back, through my mind of those opportunities. And I was like, man, that came at the right time. And I know that's how I felt. And I think a lot of people, kind of walked away from that. Like, yeah, I do have some fear in this area.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to living out, the Great Commission, Matthew clearly tells us to go make disciples, baptize them, teach them, point them to Jesus. But, the threshold looks different for each of us. But that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you had said, why don't you tell them a little bit about, for those that maybe didn't watch on Sunday, kind of that challenge you gave at the end with a little card.
Yeah, so for the invitation, I just wanted to do a little something different. And I think there's power when we can get something out of our head and out of our heart and in front of us to where we can actually see it. Like it transitions from one part of the brain to another part of the brain, and when you can actually voice what you're saying or write down what you're thinking, and I think that was kind of the challenge. Is just I gave everybody a card that says what's keeping you from it, and challenge them. Write down what is it in your life that's keeping you from crossing those thresholds, from sharing the gospel with people. And that was kind of the challenge.
Yeah. So. And kind of a theme from this, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, a lot of similar responses to everybody who filled out those cards. We saw things like pride and fear and anxiety and nervous and scared. And that's what we're going to kind of talk a little bit about on the podcast, is kind of the root of that is that fear and pride. But then how do we practically get beyond that?
Yeah.
And you shared some great examples in the message. But fear and pride, I know in my life, as I look back over, just the last few opportunities that, maybe I didn't miss, but especially the ones that I missed, just the fear that did get in the way. Satan uses that so much. He's like, oh, man, what if they think you're, stupid? What if you're, they don't like what you have to say? What if you lose something from, sharing the gospel?
Yeah.
And I think that's really
it hurts to be rejected.
Yeah.
Like in anything. And a lot of times that's our fear, is that we're going to be rejected. I remember when I was in high school, this was something that I probably wouldn't do in today's world. Yeah. But we did some door knocking evangelism. And I went up to this house, and walking up to this house, I saw this Catholic statue in the yard. And so I already know, like, hey, these people are probably Catholic. And I knock on the door, and I, start talking to them. And when I get to mention the gospel, the first thing that happens is they slam the door in my face. Like, I'm talking like my nose was like an inch from getting smashed by the door.
Yeah.
And it hurt. That really hurt my heart and my emotional and has caused, things in me that now I have had to work through to ever even think about trying to do that again.
Yeah, no, and that's a great example. I mean, I'm sure people listening this morning have all experienced that in, some way. I think one of the things that, I often think about is, when I'm getting ready to present the gospel, it's easy to maybe do a good deed. Maybe it's easy to kind of take those first steps, right?
Yeah.
You go to help somebody, and then that's when you start to get nervous, right? It's, everybody wants to be a good Samaritan.
Yep.
That's not uncommon for those who aren't Christians or even even religious people, right?
Yeah.
To do good deeds and do good things. So there's nothing really risky about that.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is say no. But then when we're transitioning into, hey, do you go to church anywhere? Whatever that is.
Yeah.
However, whatever's comfortable for you, that's when, Satan really starts, attacking, putting that doubt, putting that fear into our head, because he knows something good is about to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But so, Michael, a question, I didn't put this kind of in our notes, but practically speaking, and I can kind of, go first on this, but what would you say are some ways that people can kind of fight pride? Right before we jumped on the podcast, me and you were just talking about how this is something that, it's a lifelong process, right? We are not going to be, in his image until he comes back, right?
Yeah.
And we're constantly growing. We're constantly becoming more like Jesus. And that can get, discouraging for some, but none of us have arrived like that. But practically on a day-to-day basis, what are some things,
like you've said, naturally we're prideful, and naturally we preserve ourselves, we have an idea of self-preservation. And I think to humble ourselves is the key there.
Yeah.
And by humbling yourself, it's a process of, and there's so much that goes into it, because I can humble myself physically by, okay, I can say, well, I'm going to put myself in a different position than this position. I can humble myself emotionally. This is something that we see, like, in marriages. You have to humble yourself. In any kind of relationships, there's a lot of times where you got to humble yourself, and it's just realizing that you don't matter, and that's not normal. Like, normal is self-preservation. Normal is pride. Normal is the world teaches us to preserve ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to make us about us, to be unique. I mean, even we even hear that some from the church as a whole, as a universal church today, taking care of yourself, ministering to yourself. And there's some truth in that, right? We see Jesus do that. But I think a lot of times people take it to extreme measures. And I told my students last night, there's this pendulum of where things are at. Are you humble, or are you preserving yourself? And we want to try to aim for the middle. Like, that's the goal.
It seems like it's always on one extreme side or the other.
Yeah, a lot of times we lean more towards self-preservation. And I don't care if you're the humblest person that I'll ever meet. There's times where we're just going to lean that direction. And so we have to remember to humble ourselves. And I think that looks like, there's a ton of things that looks like. One thing is, just the other day at Walmart, I was standing in line with just a couple things, and this lady offered for me to go in front of her. That was a form of her offering humility to me. But then I offered humility back by saying, no, I'm good. I can wait. I'm not in a hurry. And I think that's the trick, is we have to put our agenda not always on the front burner. Like, in life, we always have the next thing that we're trying to get to, the next thing we're trying to accomplish, or the next thing that we need to get done. And we see this model through Jesus, through the New Testament, is there was a lot of times where he was headed somewhere or going to a place, but something else took place. And so he stopped, he humbled himself, he put his agenda on the back burner in that moment, and he modeled people before things. And people before programs is kind of the church way to say that. Is we should be more about people than we are about our Wednesday night activities or Sunday morning activities, or all these different things that we offer is great. But when people are more important, there's going to be times that we do things differently that night. For example, when we had the tragedy a few weeks ago of one of our students being shot, like, my entire Wednesday night, the next day, did not look like a normal Wednesday night. And it's, I could have went that way, but then it's about me, and it's about what I want to accomplish, instead of letting that moment be about what does God want to accomplish through this.
I'm glad we kind of got talking about, being humble, because that's, the opposite of pride. But I heard a really, really good definition of what it means to be humbled, or, be humble. I think it was Ed Welch. I heard him say this last week, but he's an author and biblical counselor. But he said to be humble is to be settled under God, being confident underneath God and your role that he has you in. In some ways that, I practically do that. I know it's really helpful for me just to kind of reflect and think about, the goodness of God, the holiness of God. And when we are prideful, what are some of those passages in the Bible or verses, that each of us can go to remind us of, God's goodness, his holiness. And that right there, that, that's just a really practical thing that will help, humble you. But it's about being settled underneath God, but also settled among the people, right? I have nothing to prove to you. I have nothing to prove to the congregation. I have nothing to prove to the team here that I work with. I have nothing to prove.
Well, and your
to the community.
image, exactly, your image among those people is not your priority.
But it's hard. It's hard to be settled. It's hard to be settled under God and settled with people. And that comes out to play a lot in when we're evangelizing, when we're sharing Jesus, because we do want a good image. We want to.
Well, and the thing is, everything in the American culture teaches us to be better.
Yep.
To be better than everybody else, whether it's in business, whether it's in sports.
Yep.
Like, we're literally teaching our students in high school through sports, like, hey, you need to be the best at this, because then it's going to lead you somewhere, right? It's like, I have and
cause you to be great.
We're creating them we're teaching them, hey, like, you're trying to create an image of yourself, but then you're going to have to protect that image, right? And you're going to have to invest into that image. And like, some of the best athletes that I know that are humble, like, like a Tim Tebow, you can see the humility in them. Like, they're not out to prove who they are. They just love what they do.
Yeah. Yep. It's almost like you have to think we're an average person being used by God. But that's hard to do, because we want to be awesome.
We want to be unique. Yeah. Right.
So we're talking about evangelism and sharing the gospel. So let's kind of transition and talk about, well, how do we, if maybe we've been fearful, maybe we've been afraid, maybe we haven't, been able to cross that line of, I'm good at serving people, but when it actually comes to sharing the gospel, what does that, kind of look like? But, the first thing I was thinking of, we got to pray for those opportunities.
Yeah.
There's power in prayer. And if we're never praying for God to use us, and for, God, make me aware of the opportunities that are ahead of me for today. Help me to go slow enough that I don't miss the,
you can see the people,
lady in the grocery line or at McDonald's, wherever it is.
Yeah.
Help me to slow down so I don't miss them. And I think if we really genuinely pray that, I can't say I do every day, but if I really genuinely prayed that every day, I'm sure opportunities would be flooding.
Yeah.
Because I would be looking through a different filter, a different lens at, my day.
Yeah.
Kind of like you said, people before programs, people before tasks, people before, whatever, the to-do list.
Yeah.
But we got to pray. But I also think it's important, especially for us, right? We are in the church setting. We were like, oh man, they're naturally, out there sharing the gospel every day, but we have to be so intentional about going to where it is dark.
Oh, absolutely.
Getting outside of the walls. And I think that's the same for a lot of church people. It's really comfortable to stay
in our circle of Christian friends, or our family who all claim to be Christians, or, like you said, us pastors. Like, it's really easy to be in a church building majority of your life.
Yep.
Or be in a ministry function, or, go to the hospital and visit a Christian, you know what I mean? Like, and so we, as pastors, our calling is the same as everybody else, to go and be a witness. And for us, we have to be so much more like on it to actually have those opportunities to see and interact with people who aren't saved. Yeah. And a lot of times it's the cashier at Walmart, or the waitress at the restaurant, or, it's those brief moments. It's not necessarily lengthy. That's why sometimes, I get sometimes I've even think like, should we, be bivocational or something, because if you're working in the secular field, you have so much more opportunity to present the gospel to people. Like, you're interacting with if you work at Ford, I know a guy there that's a chaplain there. Like, he has so much more opportunity to minister to people at Ford because he's around people who aren't saved.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember this was last fall, I believe, but we had a elderly couple there. They were pulling like 10,000 pounds of sand in a trailer, and their truck broke down. Friday afternoon, it was probably like 3:00 or so. You weren't here. Most of the pastors are off on Friday, except for me, and I don't think Moose was here. And they were in the parking lot for a while. I kind of just let it go. I was like, I don't know what they're doing. But then I was like, man, I got to go out there and see what's going on. And, sure, the story was car broke down, didn't know how to get their sand back. And, I'm not the most, skilled at, stuff like that. But I'm like, guys, we're going to hook this up to the van. We're going to get it, hook the trailer up and drive it. But, once, we did all that, we had a great conversation about how they hadn't been in church in a while, and they've been hurt by the church, and, all these really, really good things. Now, I haven't seen them since. Yeah. I think they wrote, a handwritten card, and,
But you planted a seed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that leads me to kind of the next thing that I wanted to talk about, but we all have a different role to play. So sometimes we're the seed planter, right?
Yep.
Sometimes we're the person that God uses to actually share the gospel, and they, become a believer at that moment. Sometimes we're just serving people.
Well, wasn't it like an average of, saw this in our contemporary evangelism class, but wasn't it as an average that I think someone hears the gospel 7 times or more before they actually accept it?
Yeah.
I'm like,
that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of times.
And just think, if we're not, each of us isn't doing our job.
Exactly. That's a lot of people that have to be faithful in doing what they've been called to do.
Yeah. I mean, that could take years for somebody.
Yeah.
Years. So just a challenge that we all have a unique role to play in that. Be sensitive to what the Holy Spirit says, pray about it. Look at your natural mission field, whether that's Ford, whether that's, a volunteer organization you're a part of in the community. That's not necessarily, Christian, but lots of opportunity out there. But Michael, as we kind of, wrap up, is there any last parting thoughts?
I think you have to not be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Because if you fail, it means you're trying.
Yeah.
It means and you got to be afraid. You can't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
God has not given us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, of love, and self-control. And like, we just have to remember that He's with us. If we fail, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this in our class too, is we have to realize that God doesn't need us.
Yeah. He wants us a part of His
plan. He doesn't need us to share the gospel.
Yeah.
He wants us to. It's our mission, but He doesn't need us to. Like somebody accepting the gospel is not dependent 100% on Michael Green.
Yeah.
And when you can realize that person accepting the gospel is not dependent on you, it gives you freedom to understand that God is the one who's going to bring salvation to this individual. I'm just being a vessel to be used by Him.
Yeah, and I think kind of tag on that, I'm going to say the opposite thing of you, but I don't think we can fail. Yeah. If we are obedient and we're sharing the gospel in some shape or form, God's going to use that, whether that's planting a seed, whether that's serving somebody. Like, we literally cannot fail.
Yeah.
As long as we're being obedient to do what God's called us to do, God's going to cause the growth. And,
that's right.
In His time, they're going to become believers.
That's right.
Cool. Well, guys, every Thursday afternoon, we absolutely love hanging out with you guys and chatting about different topics and the message from Sunday. And like I said in the beginning, if you guys have ideas or different things you want us to chat about or talk about or wrestle with, do not hesitate to let us know. Head on over to our website, limabaptisttemple.org. Go to the Central Hub, and there's a lot of different forms there you can fill out. Click on one. Let us know you're talking about the podcast, and we will get back with you, and we'll get that scheduled. But guys, until next time, have a great week, and we can't wait to see you.
Thanks for listening to the Lima Baptist Temple podcast. We hope you were encouraged today, and we would love to hear from you. If you have a prayer request, a topic you'd like us to discuss, or want to share what God is doing in your life, visit us online at limabaptisttemple.org.